Hi friends! Today we're talking about winter grazing and the different ways you can feed your livestock in a sustainable, regenerative way while meeting their needs and promoting nutrient cycling and land improvement. We'll define terms like swath grazing, bale grazing, cover crop and residue grazing, and discuss how each of them could benefit your management system. Let's get to it. Hey friends, welcome to the Get Goatwise podcast. Are you longing to raise goats and other animals for food but don't know where to start? Do you want to be more self-sufficient and less dependent on the grocery store? Do you wish you had a mentor to walk you through raising livestock? Hi, I'm Millie, animal scientist, cattle girl turned goat rancher, co-owner of Dry Creek Livestock, and simple living enthusiast. For 15 years, I've been on a mission to raise all of our own meat, eggs, and dairy. Here, we'll talk about raising goats and other homestead livestock, how to create sustainable animal management systems that actually work, and a bit of off-grid life with kids and livestock. If you're ready to take control of your food supply, raise livestock with confidence, and provide your family with the most nourishing meat, eggs, and dairy available, you're in the right place. Kick off your muck boots, pour a cup of coffee, and let's talk livestock. Hey friends! This is episode 78 of the Get Goatwise podcast, and we're marching toward 100 episodes. I love to celebrate by hitting 100 reviews on Apple Podcasts. Some of you have already clicked on over and left a review, and if you're one of those folks, thank you. But if you haven't, and this podcast has encouraged you or helped you in your livestock raising goals, it would be a blessing to me if you would take 30 seconds to leave a review. Just search Get Goatwise on Apple Podcasts, scroll down to ratings and reviews, tap write a review, give me some stars, and share a quick thought. Your review helps more families discover the show, which means more people taking control of their food supply, and that's really what this is all about. Here's what's happening on the ranch. I mixed up 500 pounds of mineral and delivered 200 pounds to goat ranchers. Darcy and I did a big trip, about 300 miles, delivered mineral, got chicken feed, groceries in the city, and a bunch more stops, so it was a busy and productive day away from the ranch. We set up a semi-permanent electric netting pen for the buck kids and moved them in there with all the hay they want to eat. They look really good. If you didn't know, I don't think you'd guess they were just weaned 2 weeks ago. Typically, they go through an ugly phase for a few weeks after weaning, but these guys look really good. We set that pen up with the intention that it'll stay there through the winter, so we put in a gate as well as support posts between each regular post. That way, we can use it as a breeding pen if we need it when we finalize breeding groups this winter. We brought the big herd of does and kids in this week. It's earlier than we'd hoped by a couple weeks. The area we were grazing with electric turned out to be a lot shorter on forage than I thought. There wasn't enough to keep a good fill on those goats in 24 hours, and it was a lot of fencing in the brush, which is just plain hard and frustrating. So we were faced with the decision, take them to the meadow or bring them in early. To go to the meadow, we'd have to move horses and cattle and start up troughs that we'd end up winterizing in a couple weeks, plus continue to set up the regular electric. The reason we have to move horses and cattle is because our guard dogs are not great with the horses especially. They don't see them as part of their herd. In the end, we decided that the work involved in moving everything around wasn't worth 2 weeks of grazing, and our time would be better spent building permanent fence that will extend our grazing season next year. We're getting a pretty good rain with a lot of lightning. We might even see some snowflakes before it's all over, so maybe it's good we brought the goats in early. I'm probably being incredibly optimistic that we'll get enough of that fence in to use it next spring, but at the very least we'll have the night trap done and hopefully a couple of sections finished in the meadow before we get wintered out. I had a question in my email asking about different winter feeding options and what swath grazing, stockpiling, and other terms meant, so today we're going to dive deep into that. First, a little background. Many of these terms are used differently in different regions, so I'm going to try to give you the most common meanings, but know that in your area, the meaning may be different. I do think in recent years, as some of these methods have become more popular and widely known, that the definitions are getting clearer. Let's start with winter grazing forage that hasn't been cut or harvested. It's still in its natural state on the stem. This is called stockpiling, and it means that forage has been allowed to grow without grazing to save it for winter grazing. This is a very low input system. Maybe some electric fence to protect an area within a pasture from being grazed, or just an entire fence pasture that is rested for the summer season to be grazed in the winter. The forage is still standing, so it's accessible even when snow comes, unless it's been laid down by extreme snow and completely buried. The downside of this is that the forage continues to mature on the stem rather than being cut at peak nutrient value, so nutrition may be lower than if it had been cut or grazed earlier. But again, that lower nutritional value may be worth the trade-off in the savings of no equipment or fuel cost. Also in the category of forage that hasn't been cut or harvested is cover crop grazing. Often this serves as a bridge between fall and winter grazing. Cover crops are usually a diverse mix of annuals like oats, radishes, turnips, and peas, and their purpose is not only for fall/winter grazing, but also for soil building. Cover crops can be cut and grazed, so they also fit in the next category. Swath grazing or windrow grazing. These two terms are often used interchangeably, but there is a subtle difference. Swath grazing is cutting the hay or crop, leaving it where it is, and grazing the cut feed in the winter. It's called swath grazing because the machine used to cut it is called a swather, and it lays the forage in a shallow row to dry before it's raked and then baled in a traditional haying method. But for swath grazing, it stays right where the swather lays it down. Windrow grazing takes swath grazing one step further, and the swath rows are raked into windrows, and then those windrows are left for grazing. In both of these methods, there is the cost of mechanical harvesting, and in some cases, electric fence is used to limit access to enough feed for a specific amount of time, usually 1 to 3 days, and then the livestock is given access to fresh feed. The benefit of mechanical harvest is that the forage quality is preserved better than in standing stockpiled forage. The terms swath grazing and windrow grazing are interchangeable for the most part. You'll see swath grazing used more in extension and research, and frequency of both terms varies by region. Residue grazing is grazing fields where annual cash crops have already been harvested. Common crops are corn, sorghum, and other grain stubble. We don't have a lot of that around here because we don't have much cropland, but in areas where crops are grown, residue grazing is a very common source of winter feed, and I did get some experience with that in college in Colorado and Nebraska. It's an excellent source of low-cost winter feed and fits nicely into a regenerative system for nutrient cycling. Things you have to watch out for are grain overload, nitrates, and if it gets muddy, livestock can trample the fields and make a pretty good mess. Next is grazing or feeding forage that has been harvested and baled. Of course, you can put hay in a feeder or bunk to reduce waste, and I think we've all done that and know how to do it. So for this episode, I'm going to focus on grazing these forages not only to feed livestock, but also for the purpose of land improvement. Bale grazing is when you set a bale out and let the cattle, goats, or sheep eat it right where it is. Some people spread out a whole season worth of bales across their pasture in the fall and use electric fence to limit access, similar to windrow or swath grazing. If you can do that, your winter equipment and labor cost goes way down. If we did that, we'd be feeding all the elk in the valley, and we'd run out of hay long before the end of winter. I doubt we're the only ones that would have that problem. I'd imagine deer, other wildlife, or the neighbor's cows could make rapid use of bales spread neatly out in a pasture. So, in the winter, bale grazing in that fashion does not work for us, but I wish it did. Bale grazing is a little bit controversial among ranchers, and it's often joked about as waste grazing. We do bale graze, and there is some waste, but it's absolutely worth it. We can't do it in the winter because of wildlife, but we have done it in the summer when forage was tight and in the fall before the elk come in, and it's pretty amazing the improvement we've seen in our pastures. I was surprised how little waste there actually was. The manure combined with the hay residue made the perfect environment for soil improvement, and when you walk through our pastures, you can see everywhere we've bale grazed because those spots grow the best grass, retain the most moisture, regrow consistently, and those are the places the goats head to first when they're moved into a pasture. Feed row grazing is when you spread baled hay back out in a row to be grazed. Typically, it's 1 or sometimes 2 days of feed at a time. There is feeding equipment available that allows a rancher to do this themselves with either round or square bales. We still do it the old way, forking it off the trailer 1 flake at a time. We've fed like this for years, but inside a night trap, which doesn't do much to benefit our pastures, so I wouldn't call it grazing, just feeding. But this year, we plan to feed row graze out of the night trap once snow is on the ground. We'll feed our normal way, but put the feed row outside the night trap and let the goats out to graze it, then put them back in the night trap when they're done. I think they'll catch on to this routine quickly. We're trying to get the benefits of bale grazing without putting our entire stock of hay at risk. We're also looking at spreading some seed under the feed row to see what happens, with the hope that the goats will plant the seeds with their feet and fertilize it, and that the hay residue will provide protection and water retention to help the seeds get a good start in the spring. We'll also feed in some brushy areas, which will hopefully provide some intense impact, break down some brush, and fertilize and stimulate the soil. It's an experiment and maybe a total failure, but we think it's worth trying. An added bonus is that feeding in a new place nearly every day, or at least on fresh snow, will help limit potential disease issues and parasite spread that can happen when livestock are in confined spaces. I'll be sharing more of our seeding, grazing, and soil building as we make progress. I hope this episode helps you understand the differences between swath, windrow, cover crop, residue, bale, and feed row grazing, and gives you some ideas to best use your resources to benefit your livestock and your land in a sustainable management system. If there's anything about winter feeding you'd like to know more about, send me an email, millie@drycreekpastures.com. And if you have any questions, come on over to the community and start a conversation. That's at getgoatwise.com/community. See you next week. Hey there. Thanks for listening today. I'm so glad you're here. If this episode helped you or encouraged you in some way, share the link with your homesteading friends. And if you really want to help me out, click on over to Apple Podcasts and leave a rating and a review. You can connect with me on Instagram or email linked in the show notes, and meet me back here soon for more Get Goat Wise.